A single pregnant mother was delivering meals to survive until a millionaire client began leaving secret notes with her orders. When she discovered the truth, their lives changed forever. A story of love and overcoming that will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, give it a thumbs up, and comment on where you are watching from. Monday arrived in New York City with that sticky heat that clung to the skin and made the asphalt shimmer like a distant mirage. Sarah Johnson adjusted the strap of her thermal bag on her shoulder, feeling the familiar weight of the 10 meals she carried multiply with each step. At 26, she had learned that life rarely offered discounts, but on that March morning, with 5 months of pregnancy weighing on her round belly, every mile felt like a personal challenge against fate. "Hang in there, little one," she murmured, running her free hand over her belly as she felt a twinge in her back. "Mommy just needs to finish these deliveries." The financial district buzzed as always, a chaotic symphony of honking horns, high heels on marble, and conversations in English mixed with thick accents from across the country. Sarah knew that parallel universe well. She had grown up just a few miles away in the Maplewood housing complex, where her mother, Margaret, left every morning to work as a housekeeper for the same executives who now bought her meals. The aroma escaping from her thermal bag was a declaration of war against the soulless fast food chains that dominated the area. Sautéed garlic with red onion, chopped fresh cilantro, freshly ground black pepper, and that secret touch of saffron her grandmother Zilda had taught her before passing away. "Good food is food made with love," she used to say, stirring the beans with a well-worn wooden spoon. Sarah stopped in front of the Metropolitan Tower building, a glass and steel monster stretching 40 stories toward the polluted sky. Her breath was more labored than it should have been. The baby seemed to be pressing against her lungs, constantly reminding her of her condition. She checked her phone. 11:45 a.m. She still had time to make all the deliveries before the official lunch hour began. The building's entrance was a portal to another world. Carrara marble on the walls, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than her entire apartment, and an air conditioning system. So cold, it made her shiver instantly. The security guard, a black man in his 50s with an impeccable uniform, recognized her immediately. "Hey, Sarah, how's the baby today?" asked Mr. Smith, with that genuine smile she had learned to appreciate. "Restless like her mother," she replied, smiling back. "Is the elevator working today?" Mr. Smith made a face of sympathy that said it all. "Maintenance since yesterday, dear. Only the service elevator is working, but to get to the service floors, you'll have to use the stairs." Sarah felt her stomach drop. 16 floors with a 15-pound bag and 5 months of pregnancy. But giving up was not in the vocabulary her grandmother had taught her. "No problem, Mr. Smith. I've climbed worse. Do you want me to call someone to help you?" "No way. I can handle it." The service stairs were a world apart from the luxurious lobby, white-painted concrete walls, the smell of industrial disinfectant, and the echo of her own footsteps. Sarah began the ascent, counting mentally. 1, 2, 3. On the 5th floor, a sharp pain shot through her back. On the 8th, she had to stop to catch her breath, leaning against the cold railing. "Come on, Sarah," she murmured to herself, remembering her mother's words. "Johnson doesn't give up, my daughter. We can bend, but we don't break." The baby kicked violently, as if protesting the climb. Sarah placed her hand on her belly and felt a strange sensation, a mix of maternal protection and determination that came from somewhere deep within her. It wasn't just for her that she was doing this. It was for the future she was literally carrying with her. On the 12th floor, she encountered a lady coming down, an elegant executive in a Chanel suit and shoes that probably cost more than Sarah's rent. The woman looked at her with a mix of surprise and something that seemed like pity. Sarah straightened her shoulders and continued climbing. 14, 15, 16. Finally. The 16th floor housed the office Tavares and Associates, Corporate Law. Sarah had never seen the owner of the office. She always delivered the meal to Ms. Thompson, the secretary, a woman in her 60s, who always greeted her with a maternal smile and questions about the baby. "Sarah, dear," Miss Thompson stood up from her desk when she saw her arrive. "You climbed the stairs. My God, with that belly!" "The elevator broke," Sarah explained, trying not to show how exhausted she was. "But it's nothing. Sit here for a minute, will you?" Miss Thompson pulled out a chair. "Let me get you some cold water." The office was even more impressive inside. Rich hardwood floors, shelves filled with leather-bound legal books, and those huge windows showing New York City stretching to the horizon. There was a peculiar smell in the air, premium coffee mixed with the scent of polished wood and something more subtle, perhaps expensive aftershave. Sarah took the meal out of her thermal bag, roasted chicken with okra, fluffy rice and baked beans. Ms. Thompson always praised her meals, but she had never specifically commented on her boss. "Ms. Thompson, can I ask you something?" Sarah sipped the cold water. Does he always like the food this much? I mean, he never complains about anything." Ms. Thompson smiled in a mysterious way. "Dr. Gabriel isn't much of a talker, you know. But I've worked here for 15 years and I've never seen him so interested in food as he is in yours." "Interested how?" "Oh, he keeps asking what time you're going to arrive, if you're okay. Just yesterday he asked me if you..." Marina was eating well because of the baby. Sarah felt her heart race. It wasn't uncommon for her clients to worry about her, especially the women, but something in the way Ms. Thompson spoke suggested there was more behind that concern. "Here's today's payment." Ms. Thompson handed her an envelope. "And there's a little note too." Sarah took the envelope with growing curiosity. For the past 2 months, notes had occasionally arrived with the payment, always handwritten in elegant script. Simple things like, "Thank you for the delicious meal," or "May your baby grow strong and healthy." This time the note was different. The paper was thicker, almost handmade, and the ink looked like it came from an expensive pen, one of those golden Mont Blancs she only saw in TV shows. The message made her stop breathing for a second. "Your food nourishes more than the body. It nourishes the soul. Every meal you prepare carries something I can't find anywhere else. The taste of home that I had forgotten existed. Thank you for reminding me that there is still genuine kindness in the world." Sarah read it twice, feeling a strange emotion form in her chest. It wasn't just the content of the message, but the way it was written. There was something vulnerable, almost desperate in those words. Does he always write like this?" she asked, carefully folding the paper. "Lately, yes," Ms. Thompson replied, watching Sarah closely. "You are special, dear. I don't know what you put in that food, but it's doing him good." When Sarah checked the envelope, she almost dropped everything. There were $300, 3 times the value of the meal. She looked at Ms. Thompson, confused. "Is this correct?" "It is, dear. And it's not the first time. He said it's for you to take better care of yourself during the pregnancy." Sarah descended the 16 floors in shock, the note tucked in her blouse pocket like a secret treasure. For the first time in months, since she found out she was pregnant and her boyfriend left her, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. On the street, as she walked toward her next delivery, she whispered to her belly, "I think things might be changing for us, little one." The baby stirred gently, as if in agreement. 2 weeks later, Sarah had already memorized the pattern. Monday, Wednesday and Friday, always at 11:30 a.m., she climbed those damned 16 floors. The elevator was still broken, as if it were a conspiracy of the universe to test her limits. But now there was something different about the climb, anticipation. With each step, Her heart beat a little harder, not just from the physical effort, but from the curiosity that grew like a stubborn seed in dry soil. What would Dr. James, she had discovered his name through a casual conversation with Miss Thompson, right this time? The baby also seemed to sense her excitement. In recent days, it had been moving more during the deliveries to the 16th floor, as if it knew something important was happening there. Sarah had started talking to it during the endless climbs. "Today is Wednesday, sweetheart," she murmured, stopping on the 10th floor to catch her breath. "I wonder if he'll write again. I bet he's one of those serious men, in a grey suit and an expensive tie." Her imagination had created an idealized version of Dr. James. Tall, with greying hair at the temples, designer glasses, one of those men who appeared in bank commercials. Mature, sophisticated, probably married to some blonde socialite who frequented high-end boutiques. The office was quieter than usual when she arrived. Miss Thompson seemed agitated, organizing papers with an urgency that was not typical. "Hi, Miss Thompson. Is everything okay?" "Oh, Sarah, dear." The secretary looked around as if afraid of being overheard. "Yes, it's just that he's a bit nervous today." "Nervous about what?" "He has an important hearing tomorrow. A big case, you know. He barely slept last night." Miss Thompson lowered her voice. "But he specifically asked me not to forget your meal. He said it's the only thing he's managing to eat properly." Sarah felt a strange pang in her chest. Concern, pride. It was hard to define. What has he been eating then? Coffee and more coffee, sometimes some crackers. You know how men are when they get nervous. Miss Thompson took the meal and sniffed it discreetly. "What is it today?" "Shepherd's pie with beef and potatoes. My grandmother's recipe. She always said comfort food cures any sadness." "Your grandmother was wise." Today's envelope was bulkier. Sarah quickly tucked it into her pocket, but couldn't resist opening it as soon as she entered the elevator, which had miraculously been fixed overnight. "Sarah, your meals have become the most anticipated part of my days. I don't know what you put in them, aside from the obvious seasonings, but there's something that reminds me of home, a home that perhaps I never truly had, but always sought. Today, I will face a tough battle, defending a family that lost everything due to a corporation's greed. Your food gives me strength to fight for the right people. Thank you so much for existing. P.S. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Pregnancy is a miracle that should be respected." This time the payment was correct, but there was something more in the envelope. A card from a private obstetrics clinic in the West Village. On the back, a note, "For quality consultations, you and your baby deserve the best care." Sarah leaned against the elevator wall, feeling tears threaten to spill. No one, absolutely no one, had cared so much about her and the baby since she discovered the pregnancy. Not even her own mother, who worked, so much that they barely had time to talk. On the way back home, she couldn't shake the note from her mind. A home that perhaps I never truly had. What did that mean? A seemingly successful man with a law office in downtown New York City, has she ever had a real home? In the East Side, where she lived, Sarah got off the bus and walked through the familiar streets of her childhood. Every corner told a story. The bakery owned by Mr. Smith, where she bought sweet bread after school. The pharmacy where her mother paid for. Medicine in installments when she got sick. The park where she had her first kiss at 15. That was a real home. Simple, sometimes hard, but real. What was missing for Dr. James? At home, she found her mother, Margaret, preparing dinner. At 48, she carried the fatigue of 2 decades working in other people's homes, but still maintained that quiet strength that Sarah had inherited. "How was your day, dear?" "Good, Mom. The baby is calm." Sarah poured herself a glass of water and watched her mother peeling potatoes with the same meticulous precision she used for everything in life. And work? Is it very heavy? Sarah thought about telling her about the notes, about Dr. James's strange concern, about the card from the private clinic. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the fear that her mother would find it strange. Or perhaps it was the selfish desire to keep that mystery just for herself. "No, it's fine. The clients are really happy." "That's great, my daughter. Your grandmother would be proud to see you cooking for the important people in the city." That night, Sarah stayed up late, rereading all the notes she had received. There were 7 in total, each revealing a little more about the mysterious man. He mentioned loneliness, exhausting work, the search for justice. In one of them he spoke about how the rain made him melancholic. In another, about the longing he felt for simpler times. The next day, Thursday, a day without delivery for Dr. James, Sarah found herself thinking about him. Did he win the important hearing? Was he eating something besides coffee and cookies? The answer came on Friday, with a longer note than the previous ones. "Sarah, we won the hearing. The family I was defending received a fair settlement and will be able to start over. Throughout the process, I thought about the strength you show every day, climbing those stairs even while pregnant, building a business with determination. You inspired me to fight harder. There is a rare beauty in people who turn difficulties into opportunities, who cook with love even when life has not been generous. Thank you for being that inspiration. P.S. Did I use the clinic card? I hope so." Sarah had not used the card. The public healthcare system had always been enough for her family, and the idea of accepting charity bothered her. But the way he wrote, without condescension, just with genuine concern, made her rethink. Over the weekend, she made a decision. On Monday, along with the shrimp risotto, a recipe her grandmother had learned from a friend in Salvador, she included her own note. "Dr. James, thank you very much for your concern and for the notes. I'm glad you won your hearing. I imagine the family must be very grateful. About the clinic, I'm still thinking. I've never been one to accept easy help, but maybe it's time to learn. I hope you continue to enjoy the meals. They are made with a lot of care. Sarah, P.S. The baby moves every time I climb your stairs. I think he already knows the way." It was the first time she signed her own name. 2 hours after making the delivery, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Sarah?" The voice was male, soft, a little hoarse. "This is James Tavares." Her heart raced. Hi, Dr. James." "Please, just James. I wanted to thank you for the note, and to say that I'm very honored to know that your baby knows the way here." There was something shy about the way he spoke. "I would really like to meet you in person. Would that be possible?" Sarah was silent for a few seconds. Was this what she wanted? What she feared? "I don't know if it's a good idea." Why not? How to explain? How to say that she was just a girl from the outskirts, pregnant and single, and that he was probably a bored married man looking for a distraction? How to share her insecurities, her fears, the glaring difference between their worlds? "It's complicated," was all she could respond. "Sarah," his voice softened, "I understand if you don't want to, but you need to know that these past 2 months have been the first in a long time, that I had something to look forward to during the week. Your notes, your food, you brought light to very dark days." She closed her eyes, feeling the baby move gently. "Okay," she whispered. "Next Wednesday. I'll be waiting." Wednesday dawned with that fine, persistent drizzle that only New York City knew how to make, the kind of rain that didn't really soak you but left everything damp and melancholic. Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning, 2 hours before the alarm, with her stomach tied in knots from nervousness. She had spent the entire night tossing in bed, imagining 1,000 possible scenarios for the meeting. "Calm down, baby," she murmured, rubbing her belly as she felt the baby move restlessly, as if sensing her anxiety. "Today, we're going to meet the man from the notes." In the tiny kitchen of the apartment, she prepared Dr. James's meal with extra care. Shrimp risotto with saffron, a recipe she had invented by mixing the Italian technique she learned on YouTube with her family's northeastern spices. It was a more sophisticated dish, she thought, suitable for someone who wrote letters with a luxury pen. Margaret appeared in the kitchen, still in her robe, surprised to see her daughter awake so early. "What's wrong, Sarah? Can't sleep?" "Just a little anxiety, Mom. It's normal during pregnancy." "Anxiety about what?" Margaret poured herself some reheated coffee and watched her daughter with that look. Sarah could see beyond words. "There's something you're not telling me." Sarah hesitated. In the past few weeks, she had created a secret world around the notes and imaginary conversations with Dr. James. Telling her mother would mean making everything real, solid, subject to judgments and practical advice that she wasn't ready to hear. "It's just work. It's been hectic." Margaret didn't seem convinced, but respected her daughter's space. "Be careful with this rain, okay? It's slippery." During the ride to downtown, Sarah discreetly glanced at her reflection in the bus window. She had chosen her best blouse, a navy piece that disguised her belly a bit and highlighted her brown eyes, but still felt out of place. What would a successful lawyer think of her? A 26-year-old girl, pregnant without a college degree, selling meals to survive? "Stop that," she mentally scolded herself. "You have value, Sarah Johnson. Your food makes people happy. That's a talent." The Metropolitan Tower building looked even more imposing under the drizzle, its glass reflecting the grey sky like a giant mirror. Mr. Smith greeted her with his usual smile, but there was something different in his eyes, a curiosity she couldn't interpret. "The elevator is working today, Sarah. Thank God, right? With this rain, climbing the stairs would be suicide." In the elevator she checked the time. 11:25 a.m. Dr. James had asked her to wait for him after the delivery, saying he would be free after lunch. Sarah had no idea how long the conversation would last or what exactly he wanted to discuss. Ms. Thompson was visibly agitated when she arrived on the 16th floor. "Sarah, dear, I'm so glad you're here. He's as nervous as a teenager before a first date." She lowered her voice. "He changed clothes 3 times this morning." Sarah felt her heart race. Is he here?" "He's in his office. He asked me to let him know when you arrived." Ms. Thompson picked up the meal and inhaled the aroma. "Wow, that smells wonderful. What is it today?" "Shrimp risotto with saffron." "Oh my God, he's gonna freak out." Ms. Thompson smiled in a maternal way. "You know, Sarah, in 15 years working here, I've never seen Dr. James so alive. Since you started coming, he's changed. He's smiling more, asking about people. Before, he would come in, work like a machine, and leave. What happened to him? I mean, why was he like that?" Ms. Thompson looked around, ensuring no one was listening. "His wife died 2 years ago. Car accident. Since then, he lived like a ghost. Work, home, work, home. I never saw him show interest in anything or anyone again." Sarah felt her chest tighten. Widower. That explained a lot. The loneliness in the notes, the search for a real home, the melancholy with the rain. "Do you want me to call him?" I think so." Miss Thompson disappeared down a hallway, and Sarah found herself alone in the elegant reception area, listening to the sound of rain tapping against the panoramic windows. Down below, New York City continued. Its frantic dance, millions of people chasing dreams, money, love, survival. She placed her hand on her belly and felt the baby move. "Whatever happens today will be okay," she whispered. Footsteps in the hallway. Sarah straightened her shoulders and took a deep breath. Dr. James was nothing like she had imagined. He was younger, looking to be in his early 30s, shorter than her fantasy had created, and had an air of vulnerability that contrasted with the sophistication of the environment. Brown hair, slightly disheveled, discreet glasses, a well-tailored grey suit that seemed to be worn by someone uncomfortable with formalities. What surprised her most were his eyes, brown like hers, but filled with an old sadness she recognized immediately. It was the same look she saw in the mirror after Rodrigo left her. "Sarah." He stopped at a respectful distance, his hands trembling slightly. "I thank you for agreeing to meet me." His voice was the same as on the phone, soft, a bit hoarse, but in person had a hypnotic quality that made her understand why he was successful as a lawyer. "Hi, Dr. James." She was surprised by her own calmness. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." They stared at each other for a few seconds, two strangers who knew each other through notes and meals, trying to reconcile the mental image with the physical reality. "Would you like to sit? Can I get you coffee or tea?" "Tea would be nice. With this weather." Dr. James guided her to his private office. The space was even more impressive than the reception. Books from floor to ceiling, a mahogany table that looked decades old, paintings that probably cost more than her annual salary. But there was something personal there too. A small photo of a smiling blonde woman, some well-cared-for plants, and to her surprise, a stack of handwritten notes on the table. "These are drafts," he explained, noticing her gaze. "I write several versions before sending the final ones. I've never been very good with spoken words." Sarah settled into a leather armchair that was more comfortable than any piece of furniture she had ever used. Dr. James prepared tea in a sophisticated glass apparatus with gestures that revealed an almost meditative ritual. "It's jasmine," he explained, pouring it into a delicate cup. "It helps calm." "You seem nervous," she observed, accepting the cup. Dr. James laughed, a low and slightly sad sound. "I'm actually terrified. It's been a long time since I've talked to someone about, well, personal things. Since your wife died." He stopped stirring his tea and looked at her, surprised. "Ms. Thompson told you?" "She just mentioned it. I'm sorry." "Thank you." He settled into the chair behind the desk, maintaining a safe distance. "Helena she was very good with people. I've always been more reserved. After she left, I simply stopped trying." Sarah took a sip of her tea, looking over the cup. "And what changed?" "Your meal prep." The answer came quickly, as if he had thought about it many times. "It may sound strange, but I hadn't eaten homemade food in 2 years. I lived on delivery, hotel food, sandwiches. When I tried your first meal prep, it was like waking up from a very long, bad dream." "And you decided to write notes to the meal prep delivery person." "I decided to write to the person who was saving me without knowing." Dr. James took off his glasses and nervously cleaned them. "Sarah, I know this may sound crazy, but your meals brought me back to life, and your notes. The way you write, the simplicity, the honesty, I haven't found that in anyone for a long time." Sarah felt her face heat up. "I just write what I feel." "Exactly." He put his glasses back on and looked directly at her. "In a world full of people trying to impress, pretend, sell something, you are genuine. It's rare." They talked for almost 2 hours. Dr. James shared about his lonely childhood, an only child of lawyer parents who were always working, about how he met Helena in college and how she helped him open up to the world. He spoke about the accident, the 2 years of darkness that followed, and how work had become his only anchor. Sarah, in turn, shared about her pregnancy, about Rodrigo who ran away when he heard the news, about the struggle to keep her meal prep business growing. She talked about her grandmother Zilda and her recipes, about her mother who worked too much, about the dreams she had put away in a drawer when she found out she would be a single mother. "And what about the babies, Father?" Dr. James asked carefully. "He disappeared when I told him I was pregnant." Sarah placed her hand on her belly. "He said he wasn't ready to be a father, that he had bigger dreams, as if I didn't. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was better to find out what kind of person he was before the baby was born." Dr. James was silent for a moment, watching her. "You are very strong. I don't have a choice. You do. You could have given up, surrendered to anger, to self-pity, but you chose to build something, to care for the baby, to move forward. That is strength." Sarah felt her eyes welling up. It had been so long since someone recognized her efforts instead of just giving advice or criticism. "And now," she asked, "why did you want to meet me?" Dr. James hesitated, as if carefully considering his words. "Because in 2 months of notes you made me feel more alive than in the previous 2 years. And because—" He paused, looking out the window where the rain continued to fall. "Because I think I'm falling in love with the woman behind the meal preps." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of the rain and the rapid beating of Sarah's heart. The baby kicked violently, as if it had heard the declaration. "Dr. James," she began, but he raised his hand. "I know it's complicated. I know we come from different worlds, that you are pregnant, that I am still dealing with grief. I'm not asking for anything, Sarah. I just wanted you to know." Sarah placed the empty cup on the table and stood up slowly. Dr. James did the same, meeting her eyes from across the elegant room. "I need to think," she finally said. "Of course. And you need to be sure of what you're feeling. Loneliness can sometimes be confused with other things." Dr. James nodded. "You're right." At the door, he gently held her arm. "Sarah, regardless of what happens between us, I want you to know that you saved my life, literally." Sarah looked at the man who had written notes full of vulnerability, who had cared for her baby without even knowing her, who had just confessed feelings she wasn't sure she reciprocated. "Dr. James," she said softly, "you saved mine too." As she descended in the elevator, Sarah placed both hands on her belly and closed her eyes. "And now, little one, what do we do now?" The baby kicked once, strong and determined, as if responding, "We figure it out." The next 3 days passed like a dense fog. Sarah found herself obsessively rereading Dr. James's notes, analyzing each word, as if she could decipher a secret code that revealed the truth of his feelings. The meeting had left a strange mark on her routine, a mix of excitement and terror that made her wake in the middle of the night with her heart racing. "Mom, you look like a ghost," Margaret commented on Saturday morning, watching Sarah absent-mindedly stir her oatmeal. "You haven't been yourself since Wednesday." "It's just tiredness, Mom. The baby is heavy." Margaret moved closer and sat next to her daughter at the small kitchen table. At 48, she had developed a maternal intuition that cut through any lie. "Sarah Margaret Johnson, I carried you in my womb for 9 months and raised you alone for 26 years. Don't come to me saying it's just tiredness." Her voice had that firm yet loving tone she used when she wanted the truth. "What's going on?" Sarah sighed, knowing she couldn't hide much longer. "There's a client, a lawyer. We met in person this week. And he said he's falling in love with me." Margaret was silent for a long moment, absorbing the information. "A lawyer," she repeated slowly. "From downtown." "Yes." "And you, what do you feel for him?" Sarah ran her hand over her belly, feeling the baby move gently. "I don't know, Mum. It's all very confusing. He's a widower. He's been through a lot. And I'm pregnant, single, in a completely different situation than his. Different how? Oh, Mom, you know, he has money, education, lives in another world. I sell meal prep to survive. Margaret stood up and began washing the breakfast dishes, a habit she had when she needed to think. Do you know what your grandmother Zilda always used to say? My daughter, true love doesn't look at bank accounts or diplomas on the wall. It looks at the heart. But what if he's just confusing loneliness with love? What if when the novelty wears off? What if? What if? What if? Margaret turned around, drying her hands on the dish towel. Sarah, you're creating problems that don't even exist yet. The question is, do you feel anything for him? Sarah closed her eyes, remembering how Dr. James had talked about Emily, the vulnerability in his voice, the way he looked at her as if she were something precious. I think I do. Then stop nitpicking and go find out if it's worth it. Monday arrived with unbearable heat that made the asphalt ripple like water. Sarah prepared Dr. James's meal prep with almost ritualistic care. Hearty stew with sautéed greens, crispy breadcrumbs and orange. A recipe her grandmother called Sunday comfort food, to heal any soul's pain. During the trip downtown, she mentally rehearsed what she would say. She had decided to be honest. She would share her insecurities, her fears, but also the inexplicable attraction she felt for a man she only knew through notes and a 2-hour conversation. The office was busier than usual when she arrived. Ms. Thompson was answering phone calls with an urgency that indicated an important case was underway. Sarah, dear, I'm so glad you're here. He's in an important meeting, but he asked me to let you know he wants to talk to you as soon as he's done. That's fine, I can wait. Actually, Ms. Thompson looked around and lowered her voice. Something happened that you might need to know. Sarah felt her stomach drop. What kind of thing? It has to do with the father of your baby. The world seemed to stop for a second. What did you say? David Miller. He works at Smith & Associates, 2 floors down. Dr. James found out by chance yesterday when he was in a meeting with them. Sarah leaned against the wall, feeling her legs go weak. Does Dr. James know who David is? He does. And from what he told me, he wasn't happy at all. Miss Thompson gently held Sarah's arm. Dear, sit down. You've gone pale. Sarah settled into a chair, trying to process the information. David worked in the same building. All those months, while she climbed 16 floors carrying meal preps and a baby in her belly, he was there, just 2 floors away. What else did Dr. James find out? Miss Thompson hesitated. That he's engaged. He's getting married in December to a wealthy girl, and that, she paused, they're planning to move to Europe after the wedding. Sarah felt a violent mix of anger and relief. Anger because David was building a new life while she was struggling alone. Relief because it meant he was truly out of her life and the baby's forever. And Dr. James, how did he react? He was furious. He said he was going to confront the guy about his parental responsibilities. He can't do that. Sarah stood up, alarmed. Not without talking to me first. At that moment, the office door opened, and Dr. James appeared, accompanied by 2 men in suits. His expression was serious, controlled, but Sarah noticed the tension in his shoulders. Gentlemen, thank you very much for the meeting. My assistant will be in touch regarding the next steps. He politely greeted the visitors and turned to Sarah as soon as they left. We need to talk, he said simply. In his office, Dr. James closed the door and approached her directly. Sarah, I should have talked to you before, but I found out something about David Miller. Miss Thompson told me. Dr. James, you can't get involved in this. I can't get involved. He took off his glasses and cleaned them with more force than necessary. Sarah, this man abandoned you while you were pregnant and is running away from the country to escape his responsibilities. As a lawyer and as someone who cares about you, I can't just stand by. As someone who cares about me, Sarah crossed her arms. Dr. James, we barely know each other. You can't just start making decisions about my life. Dr. James stopped in the middle of the room as if he had been slapped. You're right. I'm sorry. When I found out he was here in the same building, building a new life, while you didn't carry his child alone. His voice faltered. It made me feel a rage I haven't felt in years. Sarah watched him, seeing the genuine frustration in his eyes. Why does this affect you so much? Dr. James stepped closer slowly. Because in a week you've become important to me. Because when I imagine someone hurting you, He paused, searching for words. I feel something I thought had died along with Emily. What is it? The desire to protect, to care, to be present. Sarah felt her heart race. Dr. James, I know it's too early for these feelings. I know you need time, that the situation is complicated, but I couldn't help it. He sat on the edge of the table, keeping a respectful distance. And when I found out about David, my first reaction was to want to defend you. Sarah moved closer to the window, looking at the city below. Do you want to know the truth about David? If you want to, tell me. We dated for a year. He always said he wanted something serious, that he dreamed of starting a family. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought he would be happy. Her voice turned bitter. Do you know what he said? Dr. James shook his head. That he wasn't ready for limitations, that he had plans to go to graduate school abroad, that a baby would interfere with his life goals. Sarah turned to him. On the same day I told him about the pregnancy, he broke up with me and said I should handle the situation. How do we resolve this? I think you understand. Sarah went pale. He suggested that you... Yes. He said he would pay for the procedure and that we could start over when he returned from Europe. The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, standing beside it. And you? I told him he was crazy if he thought I would do that. If he wanted to run away from his responsibilities, that was his problem, but I would raise my child alone. And since then, nothing. I changed my number, blocked him on social media. Until today, I didn't know he worked in the same building. Sarah turned to him. Gabriel, legally you have rights. He can't just disappear. I don't want anything. I'm from him, Gabriel. No child support, no acknowledgement, no presence. I want him to stay far away from my child. But what about the future? What if the baby wants to meet their father? Sarah placed her hands on her belly, feeling a sharp pang. When that day comes, I will explain that the father chose not to be part of our lives. Simple as that. Gabriel observed her gesture and noticed her expression of discomfort. Are you okay? Just a cramp, it's normal. But as she spoke, another little contraction made her lean against the wall. Sarah, that doesn't seem normal. It's just the stress of the conversation. David has always had that effect on me. Another pang, stronger this time. Sarah slightly bent her body, trying to take a deep breath. We need to go to the hospital, Gabriel said, grabbing the car keys. No need, Gabriel, it'll pass. You're 6 months pregnant and having contractions. Let's go, now. In the rush to leave, Sarah didn't see the man watching her from the lobby of the 14th floor, hidden behind a column. David Miller had climbed 2 flights of stairs when he saw Gabriel Johnson enter the elevator, with a woman who looked familiar. When he recognized Sarah, pregnant and clearly accompanied by the most respected lawyer in the building, his first impulse was to run back to his office. But something made him stay, watching through the glass of the emergency door as Gabriel held Sarah's arm with the care of someone protecting something precious. Damn. he murmured to himself, knowing that his carefully planned life had just become much more complicated. At the hospital, after 2 exams and an hour of observation, the doctor reassured Sarah. Braxton Hicks contractions. Normal, but triggered by stress. You need to rest more and avoid situations that make you nervous. Gabriel didn't leave her side during the entire consultation, holding her hand when she allowed it, asking medical questions with the precision of someone used to taking care of important details. "Thank you," Sarah said when they returned to his office to pick up her bag. "For what?" "For taking me to the doctor. For caring." Gabriel parked the car in front of the building and turned to her. "Sarah, can I ask you a question?" "Sure. What do you feel for me, really?" Sarah looked at her hands, then at him. "I'm scared." "Scared of me?" "Scared that you might be too good to be true, scared of confusing gratitude with something else, scared that when you get to know my reality better, my family, where I come from." She paused. "Scared that you'll realize we're incompatible." Gabriel turned off the engine and faced her completely. "Sarah, do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" She nodded. "I see a woman who turned tragedy into strength, who cooks with love even when life has been cruel, who carries a baby alone and still finds energy to care for others." He gently touched her face. "I see the bravest person I've ever met." Sarah felt her eyes welling up. "Gabriel, I'm not asking for an answer now. I just want you to know that for me, you're not a distraction from loneliness. You're the reason I want to escape it." When Sarah got home that night, she found Margaret waiting in the living room with an expression she knew well. "So?" her mother asked. "So what? How was your day with the lawyer?" Sarah sat down next to her mother and told her everything. The discovery about David, the trip to the hospital, Gabriel's declaration in the car. Margaret listened in silence, only nodding occasionally. "And now?" she asked when Sarah finished. "Now I think I'm falling in love with a man who could be the best thing that ever happened to me, or the biggest mistake of my life." Margaret held her daughter's hand. "Love is always a risk, my daughter. The question is it worth taking?" That night, Sarah slept with her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move gently. For the first time in months, her dreams were not about fears or uncertainties. She dreamed of gentle hands holding hers, of a soft voice reading stories to her child, of the impossible and wonderful possibility of not being alone. Sunday dawned with a different silence in the Maplewood housing complex. Sarah woke up to the smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm pancakes, a luxury that Margaret reserved for weekends when she didn't have to leave early for work. At 7 months pregnant, Sarah moved more slowly, but her mind was racing, processing everything that had happened in the last few days. "Good morning, my princess," Margaret smiled, from the kitchen. "How are you two today?" Sarah laughed, placing her hand on her belly. "Two? Are you that sure it's a girl?" "Grandmother's instinct. She'll be a stubborn Johnson just like us." Margaret set the coffee on the table. "And she'll be as beautiful as you were." It was in these intimate moments, without the rush of the week, that Sarah missed having a father figure present the most. Margaret had raised her alone after her biological father disappeared even before she was born, a story that repeated itself generation after generation, as if women. Marina felt destined to love men who ran away from responsibility. "Mom," Sarah began, stirring sugar into her coffee, "you never really told me how you met my dad." Margaret paused with the pancake halfway to her mouth. "Why this question now?" "I don't know. With everything that's happening, Dr. James, the baby, I find myself thinking about family patterns, you know." Margaret sighed, putting the pancake back on the plate. Your father was handsome as the devil and spoke like a poet. He convinced me he would take me to see the world. Her voice carried an old bitterness. When he found out you were coming, he said he wasn't ready for ties. He disappeared from New York City, and I never heard from him again. Did you ever love him? I thought I did. Today I know I was just a 20-year-old girl confusing passion with love. Margaret looked directly at her daughter. Why are you asking me this? Are you afraid of repeating history? Sarah hesitated. Dr. James is very different from David, and from my father, from what you tell me. But what if I'm deluding myself? What if he gets tired of the novelty? Sarah, Margaret leaned forward. There's a difference between a man who runs from responsibility and a man who lost the love of his life and is afraid to love again. From what you've told me, Dr. James seems to be the second type. At that moment, Sarah's phone rang. Dr. James. Hi, she answered, feeling her heart race slightly. Good morning. Sorry to call early, but I wanted to check how you were feeling. Good. Better. That's great. Sarah, can I make a strange invitation? She exchanged a glance with her mother, who gestured for her to accept anything. What kind of strange invitation? My therapist always tells me I need to get out more, do normal things. I thought about going to the farmer's market to buy fresh ingredients. Would you like to come with me? You could teach me how to pick decent spices. Sarah smiled involuntarily. The idea of Dr. James, elegant, sophisticated, wandering around the farmer's market was strangely charming. You've never been to the farmer's market? Absolute shame. No. Emily always took care of those things, and after well, I live on delivery. That's fine, but I need to warn you. It's very different from our world. That's exactly why I want to go. 2 hours later, Sarah was in front of the housing complex waiting for Dr. James to arrive. She had chosen a simple outfit, sweatpants with an elastic waistband and a loose top, but still felt nervous. It was the first time he would come to her neighborhood to see where she really came from. The black Audi driving down the street caught the attention of several neighbors. Ms. Thompson, the official gossip of the building, appeared at the window discreetly. Mr. Smith from the bakery stopped sweeping the sidewalk to watch. Dr. James got out of the car wearing jeans, the first time Sarah had seen him without a suit, and a blue polo shirt that highlighted his eyes. He was clearly out of his element, but made a point of not showing discomfort. Hi, he smiled, bordering on nervousness. Is this your neighborhood? Yes, it's not the Upper East Side, but it's home. Dr. James looked around, the simple apartment buildings, the children playing in the street, the typical Sunday bustle of the outskirts, and his expression was one of genuine curiosity, not judgment. It looks like a real community, he said. Does everyone know each other? Too much sometimes, Sarah laughed. Come on, I'll introduce you to my mum before we go. Margaret was waiting at the door, clearly eager to meet the man who had stirred so much in her daughter's life. She had put on her best outfit, a navy blue skirt and a white blouse, and Sarah noticed that she was nervous too. Mum, this is Dr. James. Dr. James, my mum, Margaret. Dr. James approached with a genuine smile and extended his hand respectfully. Miss Margaret, it's a great pleasure to meet you. Sarah talks a lot about you. Oh, please, just call me Margaret. The pleasure is mine. Margaret shook his hand, studying his face with experienced maternal eyes. Please, just Dr. James, and thank you for raising such a special daughter. Sarah saw the exact moment her mother decided she liked him. It was subtle, a relaxation in her shoulders, a more genuine smile. Would you like to come in for a quick coffee? Mom, we're heading out now. I would love to, Dr. James interrupted, if it's not a bother. The two-bedroom apartment felt even smaller with Dr. James inside. Not because he was large, but because his elegant presence contrasted with the simplicity of the environment. But he settled at the kitchen table as if he were at home, complimented Margaret's coffee, and asked genuine questions about life in the neighborhood. "Where do you work?" he asked, accepting a second cup. "I'm a housekeeper. I work for several families in the Upper East Side." Sarah saw Dr. James process the information without any change in expression. "That must be tough. How many houses do you do each week?" "3 regulars, plus a few extras when needed." "And how long have you been doing this?" "Since Sarah was 2, 24 years. Dr. James fell silent for a moment, as if calculating something. 24 years, taking care of other people's homes to raise your daughter alone. That's impressive." Margaret exchanged a glance with Sarah. "We do what we have to do." "Yes," Dr. James replied, but there was something different in his voice. "We do." During the drive to the farmer's market, Dr. James was quieter than usual. Sarah noticed he was looking out the window with a thoughtful expression. "Are you okay?" "I'm thinking about a few things," he said. "Sarah, can I ask you a personal question?" "Sure. Has your mom always worked as a housekeeper?" "Always." "Why?" Dr. James hesitated. "It's just that she seemed familiar to me. I can't explain it." "Familiar how?" "As if we had met before." Sarah frowned. "That's impossible. You move in completely different circles." "Yeah, it must be my imagination." The farmer's market. The farmer's market was bustling on its Sunday peak. The scents of spices mingled with the voices of vendors announcing their products, entire families selecting fresh ingredients, tourists snapping photos of everything. Dr. James seemed fascinated and slightly lost at the same time. "Where do we start?" he asked, looking around like a child in a toy store. "With the spices. Come on, I'll teach you the difference between real cumin and fake cumin." They spent 2 hours wandering through the aisles. Dr. James absorbed every explanation from Sarah as if he were receiving private lessons in Brazilian cooking. He sniffed spices, tasted fruits he had never tried before, and took notes on his phone. "This is fantastic," he said, watching Sarah negotiate the price of cilantro. "How did you learn all this?" "From my grandmother. She brought me here since I was little." Sarah grabbed a handful of black peppercorns. "She used to say that good seasoning was an investment, not an expense." "Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman." "She was. She passed away when I was 15, but she taught me everything I know about cooking." Dr. James bought enough ingredients for an entire month, clearly excited about the idea of cooking for real. Sarah laughed as she saw him carrying bags like trophies. "Now you'll have to use all of this. Will you teach me?" The question came out naturally, but carried a heavier weight. It was an invitation for something more intimate, more domestic, to enter his life in a different way. "I can teach you." On the way back to the car, loaded with groceries and chatting about recipes, Dr. James suddenly stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "Sarah." "What is it?" "There's something I need to tell you." His tone made her stop as well. "What?" Dr. James looked around, ensuring the area was clear, and turned to her. "Remember I said your mother seemed familiar to me?" "I remember." "I think I figured out why." He paused, as if gathering courage. "My family had housekeepers throughout my childhood. One of them, she took care of me from the age of 5 to 15. She was like a second mother." Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "And?" "Her name was Margaret Johnson, and she was cruelly fired by my grandmother when I was 15, without explanation, without warning. I never understood why." The world seemed to spin in slow motion. Sarah leaned against the market wall, feeling her legs wobble. "You're saying that—" "I think your mother worked in my family's house for 10 years. I think she raised me." Dr. James ran a hand through his hair, clearly shaken. Sarah, I think fate intertwined our lives in a way that can't be a coincidence. Sarah placed both hands on her belly, feeling the baby move restlessly, as if sensing her tension. This is impossible. That's what I thought too, but the more I think about it, the more certain I become. Margaret taught me how to tie my shoes. Margaret took me to school when my parents traveled. Margaret defended me when my father got angry. His voice was choked. Margaret cried the day she left, and I never understood why. Sarah sat on the curb in front of the market, needing to process this. If it were true, it meant that her mother had raised Dr. James, that they had been connected long before they met, that everything, the notes, the meals, the meeting, was part of something bigger, more complex, almost impossible to believe. "Dr. James," she said slowly, "if this is true, if my mother really worked in your house, why didn't she recognize you today?" Dr. James sat down beside her on the curb. "Because I've changed a lot. 15 years, glasses, 20 extra pounds, and mainly because families like mine treated employees as if they were invisible. She probably took care of several rich boys who didn't even bother to look at her properly. But you remember her. Because she saved me from a very lonely childhood, because she was the only person who gave me unconditional love for years." Dr. James looked at her. "Just like you are doing now." Sarah felt her eyes welling up. If this were true, it was as if the universe had conspired to bring together two families that had crossed paths in a painful way in the past. It was as if her mother, who had been rejected by his family, was now being honored through her daughter. What do we do with this information? First, we confirm if it's true. Second, Dr. James hesitated. Second, we understand that maybe we are together not by chance, but by fate. Sarah stood up, needing movement to process everything. "Dr. James, this changes everything." "How so?" "Because if it's true, you're falling in love with the daughter of the woman who raised you. That's psychologically complex." Dr. James stood, up too, gently holding her arms. "Sarah, look at me." She looked. "I didn't fall in love with you because of your mother. I fell in love with you despite not knowing who your mother was." His voice was firm. "That doesn't change what I feel. If anything, it just explains why I felt so connected to you from the first note." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the baby move. When she opened them, she had made a decision. "Let's go home and talk to her. Let's find out the truth." On the drive back, both fell into silence, lost in thought. Sarah watched Dr. James drive, trying to imagine the lonely boy he must have been, growing up in a mansion full of expensive furniture and devoid of true affection. If her mother really had taken care of him, if she had been unjustly fired, it would explain a lot about the man he had become. The kindness, the concern for the less fortunate, the way he treated her and the baby with such tenderness. It would also explain why he had felt so at home in their simple kitchen, why he had praised Margaret's coffee with such sincerity. When they arrived at the Maplewood housing complex, Marina saw her mother at the window. She had probably been waiting for them to return. Miss Margaret came down to meet them at the gate, a curious expression on her face as she saw Dr. James carrying so many shopping bags. "How was the outing?" "Mom," Marina began, feeling her heart race, "we need to talk about something." "What kind of something?" Dr. James stepped closer, still holding the bags and wearing a vulnerable expression that Marina had never seen before. "Miss Margaret," he said softly, "did you ever work for the Tavares family in the West Village?" Miss Margaret froze completely. All the color drained from her face. How do you know about that?" Dr. James dropped the bags on the ground and stepped closer. "Because I am Dr. James Tavares, and you were the person who loved me the most during my childhood. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the rapid heartbeats of 3 hearts processing a truth that would change everything. Miss Margaret leaned against the gate of the housing complex as if her legs could no longer support her. Her eyes scanned Dr. James's face several times, searching for the boy she had left behind nearly 20 years ago in the 34-year-old man before her. "James?" Her voice came out as an incredulous whisper. "My little James?" "It's me, Margaret." His voice was choked. "It's me." Marina watched the reunion of 2 people who had loved each other as mother and son, separated by cruel circumstances and brought together by the most impossible fate. Miss Margaret reached out her trembling hand and touched Dr. James's face, as if she needed to confirm that he was real. "My God," she murmured, and then, unable to contain herself any longer, pulled him into a tight embrace. Dr. James hugged her back with the same intensity, as if he were a child finding his lost mother. Marina felt tears streaming down her own face. Several neighbors had discreetly appeared at their windows, sensing that something important was happening, but respecting the intimate moment unfolding on the sidewalk. "How you've grown," Miss Margaret whispered, stepping back to look at Dr. James more closely. "You've become so handsome and thin. Are you eating properly?" Dr. James laughed through his tears. "You still worry about whether I'm eating properly? I will always worry. You were my boy for 10 years. Marina observed the interaction, feeling a mix of emotions she couldn't name. There was something deeply touching about seeing the mother reunite with the child she had helped raise, but also something unsettling in the complexity of the situation they found themselves in. "Let's go inside," Miss Margaret said, finally regaining her composure. "This isn't a conversation for the street." Inside the small apartment, the atmosphere was charged with emotion and resurfacing memories. Miss Margaret prepared coffee as she always did during important moments, but her hands trembled slightly as she handled the coffee maker. "Margaret," Dr. James began, sitting in the same chair where he had had coffee just hours earlier, but now with a completely different meaning. "I need to know, why did you leave? Why did my grandmother dismiss you like that?" Miss Margaret sighed deeply, placing the cups on the table with extra care. "It was a complicated situation, James. Very complicated. Please tell me. All these years I never understood." Miss Margaret sat down, looked at Marina as if seeking strength, and began. "You were 15, starting to become a young man. Your grandmother, Dolores, was always a difficult woman, prejudiced. She didn't like that you were so affectionate towards me. But why did that matter? Because she thought you were becoming too dependent on a housekeeper. She said I was hindering your social development, that you preferred talking to me rather than people of the appropriate social class." Dr. James ran his hand through his hair, a gesture that Marina recognized and that indicated frustration. "That's ridiculous. You were the only person in that house who really cared about me. Your grandmother didn't see it that way. And when you started defending the staff, when she mistreated them—" Miss Margaret paused, recalling something painful. "Do you remember the day she argued with the gardener and you said she was being unfair?" "I remember. That day she decided I was giving you the wrong ideas. She called me into her office and said I was being a bad influence, that I was poisoning you against your own family." Marina felt anger rising within her. Did she really say that? "She said people like me should know our place and not interfere in the education of the family's children." Miss Margaret took a deep breath. "She gave me 2 options. Be fired for just cause without rights, or accept a friendly dismissal with a small severance package, but on the condition that I would never seek you or the family again." Dr. James turned pale. "She blackmailed you." "I needed the money, James. Marina was 2 years old. I was a single mother. I couldn't afford to be without work and burned in the market. Burned how? Your grandmother had contacts all over New York City. If she wanted, she could make sure I would never work in a family home again. Miss Margaret touched Dr. James's hand. I chose what I thought would be best for both of us, for you and for Marina. Dr. James stood up and walked to the small window that overlooked the building's courtyard. I searched for you, you know. I asked my parents, begged my grandmother to tell me where you were. And what did they say? That you had other interests, that you had resigned to take better care of your own daughter. Dr. James turned to her. I believed for years that you had abandoned me. Miss Margaret quickly stood up and went to him. James, look at me. Never at any moment did I want to leave. You were like a son to me. Watching you grow, teaching you your first words, taking you to school, caring for you when you were sick. Those were the best years of my life. Marina, who had been silent, absorbing the entire story, finally, she said, That's why you always taught me not to depend on a boss, right, Mom? That's why you always told me to study and have my independence. Exactly. I didn't want you to go through what I went through. Margaret turned to Gabriel. And you? How was your life afterward? Gabriel sat back down, as if the weight of memories tired him. Lonely. My parents were always traveling for work. The housekeeper who came after you was efficient, but cold. I missed you every day. And now, how did you become a lawyer? Law has always interested me, especially labor law. I think... He paused, looking at Margaret with a sudden understanding. I think it was you who planted that seed. The stories you told about injustices, about bosses mistreating employees. Do you remember that? I remember everything. I remember you explaining why it was important to treat everyone with dignity, regardless of their profession. I remember you saying that one day I would be an important man, and that I should use that to help those in need. Sarah saw tears in her mother's eyes. And you became a labor lawyer. Among other things, yes, I defend employees against abuses, cases of wrongful termination due to discrimination. Gabriel looked directly at Margaret. Your education shaped who I became. Margaret wiped her eyes with the hem of her shirt. Thank God. I always feared you would turn out like your family. Never. Gabriel leaned forward. Margaret, can I ask you a difficult question? Go ahead. Do you feel anger towards me for being a Tavares? Margaret looked at him with the same maternal expression that Sarah remembered from her own childhood. Gabriel, you were a child, a sweet, affectionate child who treated me like family when your own family saw me as furniture. She held his hands. I never felt anger towards you. I felt longing, a lot. Sarah watched the reconciliation between the two most important people in her life and felt an overwhelming emotion. It was as if pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know existed were fitting together perfectly. Gabriel, she said softly, now I understand why you connected with me so much, and why your meals affected you so deeply. What do you mean? Because the taste you missed, the taste of home you mentioned in the notes, it was the taste of my mother's cooking. It was the seasoning you ate for 10 years of your childhood. Gabriel looked at Margaret, then at Sarah. You both cook the same. I taught her everything I knew, Margaret confirmed, even the recipes I made especially for you when you were sad or sick. The shepherd's pie, Gabriel said with an emotional smile. It was your favorite dish. Sarah felt the baby move violently, as if reacting to the emotion of the entire situation. Guys, she said, placing her hand on her belly, I think someone here is trying to join the conversation. Gabriel and Margaret looked at her, and for a moment the gravity of the whole situation revealed itself. There was a pregnant girl falling in love with the man her mother had raised as a son. It was complex, unusual, almost surreal. "Sarah," Gabriel said carefully, "how do you feel about all this?" Sarah took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. "I'm trying to process. On one hand, it's beautiful. It's as if fate has stitched our lives together in an impossible way. On the other hand, it's strange. You were raised by my mother. There's something almost, I don't know, Freudian about it." Gabriel nodded. "I understand your concern, and if you want me to step back—" "No!" The response came out faster than Sarah expected. "I don't want you to step back. I just need time to understand what this means." Margaret, who had been observing the entire exchange in silence, finally spoke. "Can I give my opinion?" They both nodded. "You two are adults. Gabriel, you are no longer the boy I raised. You have become a good man by your own choice. Sarah, you are a strong and independent woman who deserves to be truly loved." She looked from one to the other. "What happened in the past between me and his family has nothing to do with what you feel for each other today. But Mom, Sarah, how many times in life do we have the opportunity to meet someone who truly sees us? Someone who loves us for who we are, not for what we want them to see?" Margaret stood up and went to her daughter. "Gabriel found you before he even knew who I was. His love for you is real, regardless of our history." Gabriel stepped closer as well. "Margaret is right. Sarah, what I feel for you was born from your letters, from your strength, from your generosity. It has nothing to do with memories of my childhood." Sarah looked at both of them, the mother, who had sacrificed so much for her, the man who represented a chance to start over, and felt a sudden clarity. "Okay," she finally said, "but if we're going to try to make this work, it has to be with complete honesty. No secrets, no omissions." "I completely agree," Gabriel said. "And—" Sarah hesitated. "I need you both to understand that our relationship cannot be about fixing the past. It cannot be about you trying to give me what you couldn't give my mother, or about her seeing in me a chance to go back to that time." "You're right," Margaret said. "This is about you two. The past is just context." Gabriel moved closer to Sarah. "Can I hug you?" She nodded. When he embraced her, she felt it was different now. It was no longer the hug of a mysterious stranger who wrote romantic notes. It was the embrace of someone whose roots were intertwined with hers in a way that neither of them could have imagined. "The baby," Gabriel murmured, feeling the movement in Sarah's belly, "is active. I think it senses when I'm emotional." Dr. James stepped back slightly and looked at her belly. "Can I—" Sarah guided his hand to where the baby was kicking. The moment Dr. James placed his palm on her belly, the baby kicked hard, as if greeting him. "Hi there, little one," Dr. James whispered. "It's me, the guy who's going to love you and your mom very much." Sarah looked at Margaret, who was watching the scene with tears in her eyes. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm seeing life make sense," Margaret replied. "I'm realizing that sometimes the bad things that happen are just the path to very, very good things." That night, after Dr. James left with a promise to return the next day for a calmer conversation, Sarah lay down on the small bed in the room she had shared with her mother since childhood. Margaret was lying in the bed next to her, both processing the surreal day they had experienced. "Mum?" "Yes?" "Do you think we can really make it work? Me and Dr. James?" Margaret was silent for a long moment. "Do you know what your grandmother Zilda always used to say?" "What?" "That true love is born when two people meet at the right moment in the right way, for the right reasons." Margaret turned to look at her daughter. You two met through food, something that brings people together, at the moment when you both needed connection. For the purest reasons, you fell in love with who you really are. Sarah placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby finally calm down. And the fact that he was raised by you only explains why he became the kind of man you could love. I taught him the same values I taught you: kindness, honesty, respect for others. Margaret smiled in the dark. In a way, I helped raise the perfect man for my daughter. Sarah chuckled softly. When you put it that way, it sounds less strange. Because it's not strange, my daughter. It's a miracle. That night, Sarah dreamed of a large, bright kitchen where she cooked while Dr. James held a baby in his arms and Margaret taught recipes to all of them. It was a simple, domestic dream, but filled with a happiness she had almost forgotten was possible. When she woke up the next morning, she knew she was ready to bet on the impossible love she had found in the most unlikely way, through meal deliveries to the office of the man her mother had loved like a son. Sometimes, she thought, fate has a very peculiar sense of humor, and sometimes that sense of humor results in the most beautiful love stories. Monday arrived with a tension that Sarah could feel in the air. She had slept poorly, waking up several times during the night with the baby moving restlessly, as if sensing her anxiety. The revelations of the weekend still echoed in her mind. Dr. James, her mother, the impossible connections fate had woven between their lives. During breakfast, Margaret was quieter than usual, lost in thoughts that Sarah knew were related to the reunion with Dr. James. Occasionally she smiled to herself, as if recalling a fond memory from when she had cared for him. "Mom, are you okay?" "I am, dear. It's strange, isn't it? After so many years imagining what it would be like if I found him again. And now it happens this way." Sarah prepared Dr. James's meal with special care. Chicken stroganoff with crispy potatoes, a dish that Margaret had mentioned was his favorite as a child. There was something comforting about cooking for someone whose tastes she was beginning to know through her mother's eyes. The journey to downtown was longer than usual due to a protest on Fifth Avenue. Sarah used the extra time on the bus to organize her thoughts. Today would be different. She was no longer just a meal delivery person getting to know a special client. She was a woman in love visiting the man her mother had raised as a son. The complexity of the situation still left her dizzy. Upon arriving at the Metropolitan Tower building, Sarah noticed a different commotion in the lobby. Security guards were speaking in low tones, and Mr. Smith seemed more tense than usual. "Hi, Mr. Smith. Is everything okay?" "Oh, Sarah, I'm glad you arrived." He looked around before lowering his voice. "There's a guy from the 14th floor asking questions about you since early this morning." Sarah's stomach dropped. "What kind of questions?" "Wanting to know your full name, if you come here often, on what days." "I found it strange. Do you know someone who works at Smith & Associates?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. "David Miller. That's the one. Do you know him?" "Unfortunately." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "Did he say anything else?" "He asked me to let him know when you arrived. He said he needed to resolve a pending situation." Mr. Smith frowned. "Sarah, if you don't want to talk to him, I can say you didn't come today." The offer was tempting. Sarah hadn't seen David in 6 months, since the day he had suggested she resolve the pregnancy. The last person in the world she wanted to talk to was the biological father of her baby, but at the same time she knew a confrontation would be inevitable after Dr. James found out where David worked. "No, Mr. Smith, thank you, but I think it's better to resolve this situation quickly." Sarah squared her shoulders. "Where is he waiting?" He said he would stay in the lobby until you arrived. Sarah looked around and saw him immediately. David Miller was leaning against the wall near the elevators, wearing an expensive navy suit and an expression that mixed nervousness with determination. At 28, he still looked as handsome as he always had: neatly cut black hair, dark eyes, that superficial charm that had once captivated her. A year earlier, seeing him again brought a mix of conflicting emotions: anger at the abandonment, sadness over the shattered dream, but surprisingly, much less pain than she expected. The last few months had changed her more than she realized. David. She approached with the thermal bag on her shoulder and her free hand instinctively protecting her 7-month pregnant belly. Sarah. He straightened up, and she noticed his eyes immediately went to her belly. You... Wow. You're really pregnant. Surprise for you, huh? Thought I was going to disappear with the problem. David blushed. I deserved that. Sarah, can we talk privately? There are some things I need to tell you. Sarah looked around the busy lobby. Here is fine. Say what you have to say. I heard that you're involved with Dr. James. Heard how? New York City is small, especially in this building, and yesterday I saw you two leaving together. David ran his hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she remembered well. Sarah, do you know who he is, his family? I know exactly who he is. Then, you know they are complicated, powerful, the kind of people who don't accept certain situations. Sarah felt her anger rise like a hot wave. Certain situations like you, like our situation. David looked again at her belly. Sarah, I came here because I care about you. You care about me? Sarah's voice came out louder than she intended, making a few people look. David, you abandoned me pregnant, suggested I have an abortion, disappeared when I needed support the most, and now you show up here saying you care about me. I know I acted badly, and badly you acted like a coward. David looked around, clearly uncomfortable with the attention they were attracting. Sarah, please lower your voice. I don't want this to become a scandal. Of course you don't want that. Your rich fiancé can't know you left a woman pregnant behind, right? David's face went pale. How do you know about Emily? I know a lot of things, David. For example, I know you're planning to move to London after the wedding. Running away from responsibilities, as always. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. Sarah stepped closer to him, feeling a strength she didn't know she possessed. And you know what? I'm relieved. Relieved that you showed your true face before my child is born, because now I know exactly what kind of father he will not have. Sarah, wait. David gently held her arm, but she pulled away. I came here because maybe I made hasty decisions. Maybe it's time to take responsibility. Sarah stared at him, incredulous. Are you serious? I am. I can help financially. I can acknowledge the child. We can make an arrangement. An arrangement. Sarah repeated the words as if they had a bitter taste. What kind of arrangement? Generous child support, private schooling for the child, health insurance, but without, he hesitated, without direct emotional involvement. No complicated visitation. Clean and simple. Sarah was silent for a few seconds, absorbing the proposal. It was everything a single mother could dream of in financial terms. Economic security for her and the baby, without the complication of having to deal with a father who was only physically present. And your fiancée, does she know about your generous proposal? Emily will understand. She knows I have pending responsibilities. Pending responsibilities. Sarah shook her head. Is that how you refer to your child? Sarah, you know that's not it. No, David, I don't know anything about you. I thought I knew you, but I was completely wrong. Sarah adjusted the bag on her shoulder. And you know what? Your proposal came too late. What do you mean? I mean that I don't need your help anymore, neither financially nor emotionally, nor in any other way. David frowned. Because of Dr. James. Sarah, you're deluding yourself if you think he will take on a pregnant woman from another man. Men like him don't do that. Men like him, rich men from traditional families, they can have fun, but when it comes to serious commitment... David shook his head. Sarah, you're too smart to believe in fairy tales. Sarah felt something cold rise up her spine, not because she believed what David was saying, but because she realized how little he understood the kind of man Dr. James was. David, she said calmly, you're judging Dr. James by your own standards. You think he's like you, someone who runs away when things get tough, who only thinks of himself. It's not about that. It's exactly about that. You can't accept that. There are men in the world willing to do what you didn't have the courage to do. At that moment, the elevator door opened and Dr. James stepped out, clearly looking for Sarah. When he saw them talking, his expression changed immediately. He approached with determined steps. Sarah. His voice was controlled, but she sensed the tension. Is everything okay? Dr. James, this is David Miller. David, Dr. James. The two men stared at each other for a few seconds. David was slightly taller, younger, had the look of a soap opera star that had always helped him in life. Dr. James was more understated, but there was a solidity to him, a maturity that contrasted sharply with David's nervousness. So, you're the famous Dr. James. David extended his hand. Pleasure to meet you. Dr. James shook his hand politely but coldly. Mr. Miller, I imagined we would meet at some point. I suppose so. Sarah and I were just discussing the whole situation. What situation? Dr. James asked, looking at Sarah. David showed up here offering financial help in exchange for not having to be a real father, Sarah explained bluntly. Dr. James turned to David with an expression Sarah had never seen cold and professionally intimidating. I see. And what was Sarah's response? That the offer came too late, David replied, but there was something challenging in his voice. Although I explained to her that certain situations can be temporary. Temporary how? Like relationships based on specific emotional circumstances. David looked directly at Gabriel. You know how it is. Sometimes we get involved with people in vulnerable moments. But when life goes back to normal... Gabriel stepped closer to David, and Sarah noticed that despite being physically smaller, there was something about him that made David instinctively step back. Mr. Miller, Gabriel said in a low, controlled voice, I will be very clear with you. Sarah and I are not together due to emotional circumstance or vulnerability. We are together because we love each other. And I don't just accept her baby. I will love that child as if it were my own. It's easy to say that now. It's easy to say because it's true. Gabriel did not look away. Unlike you, who ran away at the first difficulty, I chose to stay, and I will continue to stay. Sarah observed the interaction between the two men. One who had abandoned her at her most difficult moment, another who had shown up when she needed it the most, and felt an absolute clarity about her choices. David, she interrupted, thank you for the offer, but I don't need your help. Not your support, not your late recognition, not your presence in my child's life. Sarah, you're being impulsive. I'm being realistic. For 6 months I raised this baby alone. I built a business, prepared to be a single mother, learned to depend on myself. Sarah looked at Gabriel, then back at David. And when I found someone who is truly worth it, someone who really loves me, you show up wanting to take responsibility just because you're afraid I won't need you anymore. That's not it. That's exactly it. You only want what you can't have. When I was alone and desperate, you disappeared. Now that I'm happy and don't need you, you show up. David looked from Sarah to Gabriel, clearly realizing he had lost any chance to influence the situation. "Sarah, you will regret this. Men like him," he gestured towards Gabriel, "don't end up with women like you. It's just a matter of time." It was Gabriel who responded, with a calmness that was almost threatening. "Mr. Miller, you clearly don't know either Sarah or me. Sarah is the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, and I am someone who recognizes true value when I see it." He paused. "Something you clearly cannot do." "Gabriel," Sarah touched his arm, "you don't need to waste your energy on him." Gabriel nodded but kept his gaze fixed on David. "You are right about one thing. Men like me don't end up with women like Sarah. We are incredibly lucky that they choose to be with us." Sarah felt her heart race. Even in the tense situation of confrontation, Gabriel made her feel valued, loved, and respected. "David," she finally said, "go away. Go to London. Marry your rich fiancé. Forget I exist. I will be fine. Better than fine." David hesitated for a few more seconds, as if still hoping she would change her mind. When he realized that wasn't going to happen, he nodded curtly. "All right, but Sarah, if you ever change your mind, I won't change. If you do, you know where to find me." As David walked away towards the elevators, Sarah felt as if a gigantic weight had been lifted from her shoulders. It was over. Definitely over. The last ghost of her past had been confronted and dismissed. Gabriel wrapped her in a gentle embrace. "Are you okay?" "I am. Better than I have been in months." Sarah stepped back to look at him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For standing by my side, for defending me, for not judging me because of him." Gabriel held her face with both hands. "Sarah, you don't need to thank me for doing what any decent person would do. I love you, and that means being by your side always, especially in difficult times." Sarah felt dizzy with the intensity of those words. "Gabriel." "And about what he said, about men like me not being with women like you. I know he was being cruel. He was being foolish, because the truth is the opposite. I am the one who doesn't deserve you. You are the one doing me a favor by being with me." Sarah laughed, feeling tears of relief in her eyes. "Stop being silly." "I'm not being silly. I'm being honest." Gabriel kissed her forehead. "Now come on. Let's go up and you can give me the lunch that smells wonderful." As they rode the elevator, Sarah looked at Gabriel and thought about how life had changed in just a few months. From loneliness and abandonment to a love that seemed impossible, but became more real every day. "Gabriel." "Yes?" "I love you too." It was the first time she had said those words out loud. Gabriel stopped the elevator between floors and turned to her with an expression of surprise and absolute joy. "What did you say?" "That I love you so much." Gabriel kissed her right there in the stopped elevator of the Metropolitan Tower building, while down below, David Miller exited the building for good, taking with him the last trace of the past that Sarah was ready to leave behind. 3 weeks after the confrontation with David, Sarah was in her 8th month of pregnancy and felt like a balloon about to burst. The December heat in New York City didn't help, and even with the air conditioning that Gabriel had insisted on installing in the apartment, a gift that Margaret had initially resisted accepting, she was living breathless with swollen feet. The lunch business had grown exponentially. After other offices in the Metropolitan Tower discovered the quality of Sarah's food, orders tripled. Gabriel had suggested hiring 2 more neighbors to help with production, and now they had the operation was running in the community kitchen of the housing complex. "Sarah, you need to rest more," Margaret said for the 10th time that morning, watching her daughter try to get up from the couch to check on the baked beans on the stove. "Mom, I just want to stir the beans." "I'll do it. Sit down." Dr. James arrived at the apartment in the middle of the discussion, carrying 2 shopping bags and a playful expression on his face. In recent months, he had become a constant presence in their lives, having dinner there at least 4 times a week, taking Sarah to medical appointments, and developing a genuinely affectionate relationship with Margaret. "Good afternoon, family," he said, kissing Sarah's forehead and greeting Margaret with a hug. "How's our favorite pregnant lady today?" "Stubborn," Margaret replied before Sarah could speak. "She can't sit still for a minute." "Oh, that's genetic," Dr. James laughed. "Margaret was just like that when I was a kid, always fiddling with something, always taking care of someone." The ease with which Dr. James referred to the shared past with Margaret still surprised Sarah at times. In recent months, they had talked a lot about that time, filling in memory gaps and healing old wounds. Dr. James had even found childhood photos where Margaret appeared in the background, confirming the memories they both had. "What did you bring?" Sarah asked, trying to peek into the bags. "Surprise, but first I have some news." Dr. James settled into the armchair that had become his chair in the small apartment. "Remember I mentioned looking for a space to open the restaurant?" Sarah felt her heart race. In recent months, Dr. James had repeatedly suggested turning the meal prep business into a real restaurant. It was a dream she hardly dared to have, but he spoke of it as if it were inevitable. "Did you find something better than that? Remember the commercial space on the ground floor of the Metropolitan Tower building that had been abandoned for years? The one that used to be a diner." "Exactly. I secured a lease with special conditions. The building owner is a client of the office and liked the idea." Dr. James smiled. "Sarah, do you want to open your restaurant in the same building where it all started?" Sarah was speechless. The idea was poetic, almost cinematic. Returning to the place where she had climbed 16 floors pregnant and tired to discover she had found the love of her life. "Dr. James, that must cost a fortune." "It's within the budget we calculated, and it will be perfect. Guaranteed clientele, strategic location, and—" He paused dramatically. "It will have an incredible story to tell." Margaret, who had been listening to the whole conversation while stirring the beans, turned to them. "Sarah, this is a unique opportunity. But what if it doesn't work? What if people in the downtown area don't like our food?" Dr. James got up and knelt beside the couch where Sarah was sitting. "Sarah, you've already captured half the building selling meal prep. Imagine what you can do with a real restaurant, with your own space, a full menu, and the baby. Am I going to manage taking care of a newborn and a restaurant at the same time?" "You won't be alone. Margaret can help. I'll be there." Dr. James held her hands. "And most importantly, you'll be doing what you love." Sarah looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked at Dr. James, whose eyes sparkled with genuine excitement for her success. It was hard to believe that just a few months earlier she felt completely alone in the world. "Okay," she finally said, "let's open a restaurant." Dr. James shouted with joy and kissed her, while Margaret clapped from the kitchen. The baby, as if listening, moved vigorously in Sarah's belly. "I think someone approved the idea," she laughed, placing her hand where the baby had kicked. "Of course they did. They'll be the first customer of the restaurant," Dr. James said, placing his hand over hers on her belly. It was at that moment that Sarah felt something different. It wasn't the normal movement of the baby. It was a strange sensation, as if something was changing inside. "Dr. James, what is it?" "I think—" Before she could finish the sentence, she felt a warm liquid trickle down her legs. Margaret, who had developed a sixth sense for these things over the years, working as a domestic worker and assisting employers in childbirth, immediately dropped what she was doing. "Sarah, your water broke." Dr. James turned pale. "Broke how? What does that mean?" "It means "The baby is coming," Margaret said, with the calm of someone who had been through this before. Dr. James grabbed the hospital bag. "Sarah, take a deep breath. But there's still 2 weeks until the due date." "Babies don't read calendars, my daughter." Margaret helped Sarah to her feet. "How are you feeling?" "Wet, and with a back pain that, ow!" A strong contraction made her bend slightly. Dr. James, who had run to grab the bag, returned with a look of total panic. "Should I call an Uber, an ambulance? How does this work?" "Dr. James, calm down," Sarah said between breaths, trying to soothe him despite her own anxiety. "We're going to the hospital, by car." The trip to the general hospital was a mix of hellish traffic, increasingly closer contractions, and Dr. James driving like he was in a Formula One race. Margaret sat in the back seat, holding Sarah's hand and timing the contractions on her phone. 3 minutes apart," she announced. "This baby isn't playing around." At the hospital, everything happened very quickly. An efficient team took Sarah to the labor room, while Dr. James filled out forms with hands trembling so much he could barely write. "Sir, are you the father of the child?" a nurse asked. Dr. James hesitated for a fraction of a second. Technically, the answer was no. But when he looked through the door of the room and saw Sarah breathing heavily during a contraction, he had no doubt. "Yes, I am the father." The next 6 hours were a mix of pain, anticipation, and moments of pure emotion. Dr. James didn't leave Sarah's side for a second. 1 minute, holding her hand during the contractions, encouraging her when she said she couldn't take it anymore, offering ice and words of support. Margaret paced between the room and the hallway, where she had found Miss Thompson, who had insisted on coming to the hospital as soon as Gabriel called to say he wouldn't be returning to the office that day. "How is she?" Miss Thompson asked for the 5th time. "Strong. My daughter has always been strong," Margaret replied, but there were tears of emotion in her eyes. At 9:37 p.m., on a rainy Thursday in December, amidst a particularly intense contraction, Sarah felt the urgent need to push. "Doctor, I think it's time," the obstetric nurse said. "You can see the baby's head, Sarah. On the next contraction, you will push," the doctor instructed. Gabriel held Sarah's left hand so tightly that it was almost numb, but she didn't have the courage to ask him to loosen his grip. It was as if that physical contact was an anchor in the storm of sensations overtaking her body. "I can't do this anymore, Gabriel. I have no strength." "You can. You are the strongest person I know." Gabriel kissed her sweaty forehead. "One more push, and our baby will be here." "Our baby," Sarah repeated, finding energy in words she had dreamed of hearing. With one last effort that seemed impossible seconds before, Sarah felt a sudden sense of relief, followed by the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, the loud and indignant cry of a newborn baby. "It's a girl," the doctor announced. "A beautiful and healthy girl." Gabriel began to cry even before seeing the baby, when the nurse placed the little one in Sarah's arms. All red, wrinkled and perfect, he leaned in and kissed both the daughter and the mother. "She's beautiful," he whispered, "just like her mother." Sarah looked at her little girl, her dark eyes, tiny nose, and clenched fists protesting against the cold and noisy world she had just entered, and felt an overwhelming love she didn't know was possible. "Hi, my love," she murmured to the baby. "I am your mother. And this," she looked at Gabriel, "is your father." Gabriel leaned over both of them, forming a protective cocoon around his new family. "Hi, Princess. Welcome to the world." When Margaret was allowed into the room, she found a scene that made her cry instantly. Sarah radiant, despite her exhaustion, Gabriel holding the baby with the care of someone handling the most precious treasure in the world, and the three united in an intimacy that felt natural despite the complexity of their origins. "What will my granddaughter be named?" Margaret asked, kissing her daughter's forehead. Sarah and Gabriel exchanged glances. They had discussed names over the past few weeks, but had never reached a definitive decision. "Emily," Sarah said softly, looking at Gabriel. "Emily Margaret." Gabriel was silent for a few seconds, clearly emotional. Emily was the name of his first wife, and Margaret was a tribute to the grandmother who would raise her. It was a name that connected the past, present, and future in a perfect way. "Emily Margaret Johnson," he said, testing the sound of the words. "It's perfect." "Emily Margaret Johnson Tavares," Sarah gently corrected. Gabriel looked at her in surprise. "Sarah, if you want to be her real father, she will have your last name too." Gabriel kissed Sarah as if it were the first time, and then gently kissed Emily's head, who had stopped crying and was observing the world around her with the comical seriousness of newborns. "Emily Margaret Johnson Tavares," he repeated, "our daughter." That night, while Sarah rested and Emily slept in the crib beside the hospital bed, Gabriel called his assistant and asked to cancel all appointments for the next 3 days. "Any emergency, Dr. Gabriel?" the young man asked. Gabriel looked at Sarah sleeping, at Emily breathing softly, and at Margaret organizing the baby's things with the care of an experienced grandmother. "Yes," he replied, "a very good emergency. My family just became complete." When Sarah woke in the early morning to breastfeed Emily for the first time, she found Gabriel sleeping in the uncomfortable chair beside the bed, his hand extended toward the crib, as if he were protecting them even in his sleep. It was an image she would cherish forever. The man who had entered her life through handwritten notes, now sleeping like a guardian of everything they had built together. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe, to fate, to any force that had conspired to bring their lives together in such an improbable and perfect way. Emily opened her dark little eyes and looked directly at her mother, as if she perfectly understood that she had arrived in a family where she would be loved unconditionally. "Welcome to our crazy story, my love," Sarah murmured, stroking her daughter's little face. "You're going to love hearing how Daddy and Mommy met." 6 months after Emily's birth, the ground floor of the Metropolitan Tower building was unrecognizable. What had once been an abandoned and gloomy commercial space had transformed into a cozy restaurant that exuded the unmistakable aroma of Brazilian spices and family love. Sarah moved through the kitchen with Emily strapped to her in a colorful sling, giving instructions to the 3 employees she had hired, all neighbors from the Maplewood housing complex who now had formal jobs and paychecks for the first time in their lives. "Emily, more cilantro in the shrimp risotto. Ms. Thompson, don't forget to taste the seasoning of the roasted chicken before serving," Sarah directed, while Emily observed everything with alert little eyes. "And Lisa, please check if the front tables have fresh flowers." Margaret's Seasoning, the name Sarah had chosen to honor her mother, had been open for 3 months and already had a waiting list during lunch hours. The menu changed weekly. Gabriel always highlighted regional dishes prepared with the authenticity that only comes from recipes passed down through generations. He entered through the back door, carrying boxes of fresh ingredients from the farmer's market, a task that had become his ritual on Thursday mornings. In recent months, he had learned to distinguish real cilantro from fake, to choose ripe pineapples by smell, and to negotiate prices with the ease of a native New Yorker. "How are my favorite ladies?" he asked, kissing first Emily, then Sarah. "Your daughter is being an excellent kitchen supervisor," Sarah laughed, "and your wife is nervous about the health inspection today." Gabriel paused mid-motion of putting away the ingredients. "My wife?" Sarah blushed, realizing she had used the term naturally, without thinking. They had been living together for 4 months. Gabriel had bought a 3-bedroom apartment in the West Village, halfway between his work and the restaurant, sharing all responsibilities with Emily, planning their future together. They were a family in every practical sense, but they had never formalized anything officially. It was just a figure of speech, she stammered. Gabriel set down the box of spices and approached her, taking Emily out of the sling with the skill he had developed over the past months. "Sarah, will you marry me?" The entire restaurant fell silent. Emily stopped stirring the shrimp risotto. Ms. Thompson turned with her spoon in the air, and Lisa appeared from the front area as if she sensed something important was happening. "Gabriel, that's not how these things work," Sarah began, but he interrupted her. "Why not? We love each other. We live together. We raise Emily together. We build a business together." Gabriel adjusted Emily in his left arm and held Sarah's hand with his right. "The only thing missing is to make official what we already live every day." Sarah looked around, at the staff who had become like sisters, at the restaurant that was the manifestation of all their dreams, at Emily who looked at them with the comic seriousness of babies, at Gabriel who watched her with that mix of vulnerability and determination she had learned to love. "Gabriel Johnson," she said solemnly, "are you asking me to marry you in the middle of the kitchen, in front of the staff, holding our daughter and smelling of cilantro?" "I am. Without a ring, without kneeling, without a prepared romantic speech. Without any of that, just with true love and the certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life building impossible stories with you." Sarah felt her eyes well up. This was exactly how it should be. No pomp, no theatrics, just the two of them and the real life they had built together. "Then I accept." The staff erupted in applause and cheers of joy. Emily, startled by the sudden noise, began to cry, which made everyone laugh. Gabriel kissed Sarah over their daughter's head, sealing a commitment that had actually existed for months. "Now you all will have to put up with me in the family forever," Gabriel said to Emily, who stopped crying and looked at him with an expression that seemed to say, "Obviously." Ms. Margaret arrived at that moment, coming from the bakery where she had gone to pick up fresh bread for the restaurant. She found everyone celebrating and Gabriel and Sarah kissing with Emily in the middle. "What's happening here?" she asked, placing her hands on her hips. "Mom," Sarah said with the widest smile Ms. Margaret had ever seen, "you're going to have to organize a wedding." Ms. Margaret dropped the bags of bread to the floor. "You got engaged?" "We did," Gabriel confirmed. "And you will be the mother of the bride and the honorary grandmother." Ms. Margaret immediately began to cry, that cry of absolute joy that comes when all the pieces of life finally fit perfectly together. "Oh my God, I need to sit down." She let herself fall into a chair. "My daughter is getting married, to the boy I raised. What a crazy story are we living." "Our story, Mom," Sarah replied. "The most improbable and perfect story in the world." The health inspection went perfectly. The restaurant received top marks in all categories. That night, when they closed the doors after another day of being fully booked, Sarah, Gabriel, Ms. Margaret and Emily sat at the back table to have dinner as a family. "Guys," Sarah said, breastfeeding Emily while eating the dessert that Ms. Thompson had prepared, flan with guava sauce, "I have a crazy proposal." "More crazy than accepting a marriage proposal in the kitchen?" Gabriel asked. "More crazy. How about we get married here? In the restaurant?" Gabriel paused with the spoon of flan halfway to his mouth. "Here? Think about it. This is where it all started. Well, not exactly here, but in the building. It was going up to deliver your lunch that our story began." Sarah looked around the space they had transformed with so much love. "And now this place represents everything we have built together." Ms. Margaret clapped her hands. Sarah, that's perfect. We can decorate with the plants you love, make the food right here, and we can invite all the customers who have followed our story. Gabriel got excited. Ms. Thompson, Mr. Smith, even the staff from the other offices. And the girls can help organize, Sarah continued, referring to the staff. It will be a real family celebration. Gabriel stood up and kissed Sarah, then kissed Emily, and then hugged Miss Margaret. You all are crazy, and I love you exactly for that. In the weeks that followed, Margaret's seasoning became the operation center for the most unusual wedding that downtown New York City had ever seen. Regular customers offered help spontaneously. Miss Thompson appointed herself as the decoration coordinator, and Mr. Smith insisted on being responsible for the event's security. The invitation, handwritten by Sarah, a tradition she had kept since the first invitations, simply stated, Sarah and Gabriel invite you to celebrate with us the day when two families became one, in the place where it all began, with a lunchbox delivered with love. There will be good food, lively music, and impossible stories that became reality. On the eve of the wedding, Sarah was in the apartment she now shared with Gabriel, getting Emily ready for the ceremony. The baby, at 8 months old, had grown into a curious little one crawling around the house, exploring everything with the typical scientific determination of her age. Emily, stop trying to eat the flower on your dress, Sarah laughed, trying to dress her daughter in the outfit that Margaret had made, a white dress with crochet details that was a work of art. Gabriel appeared at the bedroom door, wearing the suit he had chosen for the occasion. Not the formal attire he wore for work, but a more relaxed navy blue suit that matched the intimate setting they had planned. How are the two most beautiful women in New York City? He asked, sitting on the bed to help with Emily. Nervous, Sarah admitted. What if something goes wrong? What if the food isn't good? What if it rains? Gabriel held her face in both hands. Sarah, you are marrying the man who loves you more than anything in this world, in the place you both transformed into a symbol of everything you've achieved together, surrounded by the people who cheer for you. What could go wrong? Sarah took a deep breath, letting his calmness wash over her. You're right. It's hard to believe that this is all real sometimes. I know, I feel that way too. Gabriel picked up Emily. Do you know what the most incredible part of this whole story is? What? That if someone had told me a year ago that I would fall in love with the daughter of the woman who raised me, that I would become a father to a child who isn't biologically mine, that I would leave the family office to open a restaurant. He shook his head. I would have thought they were crazy. And now? Now I know that the best things in life are always the ones we never planned. Emily chose that moment to say her first clear word. Papa. Gabriel and Sarah fell into complete silence for a few seconds, absorbing the moment. Emily had just called Gabriel Dad for the first time. Did you hear that? Gabriel whispered, as if afraid it was just his imagination. Papa, Emily repeated, smiling and clapping her hands. Gabriel sat heavily on the bed, clearly too emotional to speak. Sarah sat beside him and placed her hand on his shoulder. She knows who her father is, Sarah said softly. Gabriel tried to speak, but his voice faltered. Gabriel, you have been her father since the day she was born. Biology doesn't define family. Love does. Gabriel kissed Emily's forehead, then looked at Sarah. Thank you. For what? For letting me be the father of your daughter, for transforming my life, for teaching me that family is so much more than blood, its choice, its presence, its unconditional love. Sarah felt her eyes welling up, but she controlled herself not to smudge the makeup that Lisa had done so carefully. Now come on, she said, getting up. Let's get married before I start crying and ruin all of Lisa's hard work. An hour later, at Margaret's seasoning, decorated with flowers from the farmer's market and yellow lights that created a warm and festive atmosphere, Sarah walked slowly between the tables, filled with people who had become family in the past months. There was no father to walk her down the aisle. She had never had one, but that didn't matter. Margaret walked beside her, Emily in her arms, the 3 generations of Johnson women, united in the most important moment of their lives. Gabriel waited for her. At the back of the restaurant, flanked by Mr. Smith, who had offered to be the best man, and Ms. Thompson, who had been discreetly crying for the past 10 minutes. The officiant, a friendly man Gabriel had met through work, conducted the ceremony with the appropriate solemnity, but also with the warmth that the moment called for. Gabriel, do you take Sarah as your wife, to love and respect her in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, in wealth and in poverty, for the rest of your lives? I do, completely and forever. Sarah, do you take Gabriel as your husband, to love and respect him in joy and in sorrow, in health and in sickness, in wealth and in poverty, for the rest of your lives? Sarah looked at Gabriel, then at Emily in Margaret's arms, then at all the loved ones who had gathered to celebrate with them. I do, and I also accept the responsibility of building with him the most improbable and perfect family New York City has ever seen. When they kissed as husband and wife, officially sealing a union that already existed in every practical sense, the restaurant erupted in applause. Emily clapped her hands and shouted, "Papa, Mama," with the contagious joy of small children. The celebration that followed was exactly as Sarah had dreamed: abundant food prepared with love, lively music that even the most serious executives danced to, and stories told and retold about how a handwritten note and a lunchbox of roasted chicken had led to that improbable meeting. Late at night, when the last guests had left and the restaurant returned to silence, Sarah and Gabriel sat at the same table where they had dined as a family so many times. Now, officially as husband and wife, Emily slept soundly in her stroller, exhausted from being the center of attention for hours. Margaret had gone home after helping to clean everything, with the promise that she would return the next morning to care for her granddaughter, while the newlyweds enjoyed a honeymoon. One day in the apartment. "So, Mrs. Johnson," Dr. James said, playing with the simple ring that Sarah now wore on her finger, "how does it feel to be a married woman?" "Just like I felt yesterday, being a woman living with the man I love," Sarah replied honestly. "But there's something special about knowing it's official, right? That when people ask who we are to each other, we can say, 'My husband, my wife.'" "My wife," Dr. James repeated, testing the sound of the words. "I really like how that sounds." Sarah leaned in to kiss him, but stopped halfway. "Dr. James, can I tell you something I always think about?" "Of course." "If you hadn't written that first note, if you were just another customer who received the meal and paid without saying anything, we would have never truly met." Dr. James held her hands across the table. "Sarah, I was always going to write that note." "How do you know?" "Because from the first meal, I felt there was something special about that food. It wasn't just the taste. It was the care, the love you put into every dish." Dr. James caressed her fingers. "People like you are impossible to ignore. One way or another, our paths were meant to cross." Sarah smiled, feeling that deep peace that came from knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. "Do you think our story is too crazy to be true?" "I think our story is too perfect to be made up," Dr. James replied. "I think the universe conspired in a very specific way to bring together a girl from the outskirts who cooks with love, a lonely lawyer still learning to live after loss, and a strong woman who raised them both at different times." Emily stirred in her sleep and murmured something that sounded like "Mommy, Daddy," causing both to chuckle softly. "And now," Sarah asked, "what's the next chapter of our impossible story?" Dr. James looked around the restaurant they had built together, at their peacefully sleeping daughter, at the woman who had completely transformed his life. Now we live happily ever after, not in the fairy tale way, with castles and princess dresses, but in a real way. With bills to pay, Emily making art on the walls, you teaching me how to season food properly, me helping you with the restaurant's accounting. He paused. And a lot of love to sustain it all. Sarah kissed her husband. It was still strange to think of that word, right there at the restaurant table where everything had begun with a meal delivery and ended with a wedding. Dr. James. Yes? Thank you for writing that note. Thank you for climbing 16 flights of stairs pregnant to deliver a meal that changed my life. Outside, New York City continued its frenetic pace, millions of people rushing after dreams, money, love, purpose. But inside Margaret's seasoning, a family had found each other in the most unlikely way and discovered that sometimes the best stories are those that no one could have invented. And if someone asked Sarah how it was possible to turn a meal delivery into a true love story, she would say the secret was the same as she used in her recipes: a pinch of courage, a generous dose of hope, and a lot of love. The rest, she had discovered, fate took care of providing. 2 years after the wedding, on a sunny March morning, Sarah was in the kitchen of Margaret's Seasoning, preparing the special birthday menu for the restaurant, when Emily, now a 2.5-year-old child with the typical infinite curiosity of her age, decided to help by organizing the spices from the drawer all over the floor. "Emily, Margaret, what are you doing?" Sarah asked, trying to sound serious but barely hiding her smile. "Helping Mommy," Emily replied, with the seriousness of someone executing a task of extreme importance. "Cumin here, little pepper there." Sarah laughed, remembering how her own mother had reacted when she did the same thing in their home kitchen years before. Some family traditions perpetuated in unexpected ways. The restaurant had become one of the most beloved culinary spots in downtown New York City. Not for luxury or sophistication, it remained a simple place with wooden tables and homey decor, but for the authenticity of the food and the warmth that emanated from every dish served. Dr. James entered through the back door, carrying baby Emily #2. Yes, they had decided to have another child, and Maria had been born 6 months earlier, honoring the great-grandmother she had never met, but whose culinary legacy continued through family recipes. "How are the chefs of the house?" he asked, kissing Sarah and bending down to help Emily pick up the scattered spices. "Your eldest daughter is reorganizing our spice system," Sarah replied, nursing Maria while supervising the lunch preparation. "And your youngest daughter is deciding she no longer wants to nurse. She just wants to play." Dr. James sat on the little stool they had placed in the kitchen, especially for these family moments. In the past 2 years, he had learned to balance work at the office, which now focused exclusively on social causes, with active involvement in raising their daughters and running the restaurant. "Speaking of reorganizing," he said, pulling an envelope from his pocket, "an interesting letter arrived today." Sarah frowned. "What kind of letter?" "Remember the article that came out in Time about the restaurant, the one that told our story?" "Of course. From abandonment to love. How a meal delivery turned into a family culinary empire." Sarah remembered the title perfectly, which she had thought was a bit exaggerated at the time. "A letter came from a production company. They want to make a documentary about our story." Sarah almost let Maria slip from her lap. A documentary. About real love stories that started from... "It seems that our story caught attention because..." Gabriel read the letter, "because it represents the possibility of a fresh start, the strength of Brazilian women, and the importance of family bonds that transcend biology. Emily stopped playing with the spices and looked at her parents. "Dad, Mom, what is a documentary, sweetheart? It's when people make a film telling true stories," Gabriel explained. "Our story?" Emily asked. "Our story," Sarah confirmed, still processing the proposal. The idea was both exciting and frightening. In recent years, several people had shown interest in how they met: restaurant customers, journalists, even other couples seeking inspiration. But the prospect of making that intimate journey public on such a large scale was daunting. "What do you think?" Gabriel asked. Sarah looked around the kitchen where she spent most of her days, at Emily playing on the floor, at Maria, who had finally relaxed and fallen asleep in her lap, at Gabriel, who was watching her with that patient expression she had learned to love. I think it could be a way to show others that impossible stories happen every day, that true love still exists, even when it comes wrapped in ways we never imagined." Margaret arrived at that moment, now 62 years old, with a few more grey hairs, but with the same energy as always. She had retired from her job as a housekeeper when the restaurant started turning a profit, and now divided her time between helping with her granddaughters and managing the business's administrative side. "What serious conversation is this?" she asked, tying the apron she wore to help in the kitchen. "Grandma Margaret," Emily shouted, running to hug her grandmother. "Dad and Mom are going to be on television." Margaret looked from Sarah to Gabriel with an amused expression. "Television?" Gabriel explained about the documentary, while Margaret listened with growing interest. "And what are you two thinking?" she asked when he finished. "We're divided," Sarah admitted. "It's an incredible opportunity, but it's also exposing our private life to the whole of New York." Margaret sat down next to Gabriel, picked up Emily, and fell silent for a few moments, a sign that she was seriously considering the matter. "You know what I think?" she finally said. "I think you have lived a story that needs to be told, not by you, but by other people." "What do you mean, Mom?" "Sarah, how many pregnant and abandoned women are there in this country? How many men have lost hope in love after a great loss? How many families are separated by class prejudice?" Margaret looked directly at her daughter. "If your story can give hope to even one person, isn't it worth the discomfort?" Gabriel nodded slowly. "Margaret is right. Our story is not just ours. It's for all the people who believe that it's still possible to find true love in a complicated world." Sarah transferred Maria to Gabriel and stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the bustling city centre. Outside, thousands of people rushed by, each carrying their own stories of love, loss, hope, and disillusionment. "All right," she finally said, "let's tell our story." 3 months later, the film crew arrived at the restaurant on a Tuesday morning. The director, a young and enthusiastic man named Carlos, had spent weeks researching every detail of the story. From the original notes that Gabriel still kept to the recipes from Ms. Maria that Sarah continued to use. The idea is to show how love can arise in the most unexpected places, Carlos explained as the crew set up the cameras, and how family goes far beyond biological ties. The filming stretched over a week. They filmed Sarah cooking in the restaurant, Gabriel working in the office, the girls playing, Margaret telling stories from her time working at the Johnson family home. Each scene reconstructed pieces of the journey that had brought them to that point. The most emotional moment was when Carlos asked to reenact the first meal delivery. Sarah climbed the 16 floors of the Metropolitan Tower building, now not pregnant but carrying Emily, while the cameras followed every step of the staircase where it all began. "How do you feel coming back here?" Carlos asked when they reached the 16th floor. Sarah looked around the familiar hallway, breathed in the cold air conditioning that reminded her of so many tiring mornings, and smiled, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for having had the courage to climb these steps even when everything seemed impossible. Because if I had given up back then—" She looked at Emily, who was watching everything with curiosity. None of this would have happened. The hardest part was recording the testimony about David. Sarah had hesitated to include that part of the story, but Gabriel convinced her that it was important to show how she had found the strength to move on, even after abandonment. "Today I understand that David did me a favor," she said to the camera with an honesty that surprised herself. "If he had stayed out of obligation, out of pressure, our story would be about resentment and bitterness. Him leaving my life opened space for Gabriel to come in, and for us to build something based on true love, not obligation." Gabriel also recorded his testimony, talking about the loneliness after Helena's death, about how Sarah's notes had become the only light on very dark days, about the discovery that Margaret had been his second mother in childhood. "People ask if it's strange that I married the daughter of the woman who raised me," he said, looking directly at the camera. "But I see this as proof that there are connections in the world that go beyond what we can explain. Margaret taught me to be the kind of man who could love Sarah the way she deserves. In a way, she spent 20 years preparing me to find her daughter." Margaret, initially shy in front of the cameras, she revealed herself to be a natural storyteller. She spoke about the injustice of being fired from the Johnson household, about the difficult years raising Sarah alone, about the surreal moment of recognizing Dr. James at the entrance of the Maplewood housing complex. "I always believed that God writes straight with crooked lines," she said, holding Maria in her arms while Emily played at her feet. "But this story he wrote with golden thread." The documentary aired 6 months later on a Friday night, prime time for American television. Sarah, Dr. James, the girls and Margaret gathered at the West Village apartment to watch together, surrounded by a few close friends and restaurant staff. Watching their lives edited and narrated by a professional voice was a surreal experience. The most intimate moments, the tears, the doubts, the declarations of love, were laid bare for millions of people, but somehow it didn't feel invasive. It felt important. The phone began to ring even before the documentary ended. First it was friends and acquaintances, then journalists asking for interviews, and later complete strangers who had somehow gotten the number and wanted to thank them for the story. In the days that followed, the restaurant was packed with people wanting to meet the couple from television. Sarah initially felt uncomfortable with the attention, but gradually realized that people weren't coming just out of curiosity. They were seeking hope. "Thank you for showing that happy endings still exist," said a woman in her 70s who showed up at the restaurant one Monday afternoon. "My granddaughter is pregnant and single, and I'm going to show her the documentary, so she knows that everything can change." "You inspired me not to give up on love," said a middle-aged man who had lost his wife the previous year. "I thought at 50 it was too late to start over." Letters began to arrive in piles. People sharing their own stories of overcoming, asking for advice, sharing how the documentary had impacted their lives. Sarah and Dr. James spent several nights reading and responding as much as they could. One letter in particular caught their attention. It was from a young woman in New York City, 6 months pregnant and abandoned by her boyfriend, who wrote, "I was thinking about giving up on everything when I saw your story. I thought, if Sarah managed to climb 16 flights of stairs pregnant to deliver meal deliveries and still found the love of her life, I can also find my strength. Thank you for reminding me that our story doesn't end when someone abandons us. It's just beginning the most important part." Sarah cried reading that letter, and she knew she had made the right decision to agree to the documentary. 6 months after the airing, on a quiet Saturday afternoon, Sarah was at the restaurant organizing the stock when Emily ran to her with a typical 3-year-old's urgent expression. "Mommy, Mommy, there's a girl outside who wants to talk to you." Sarah stepped out of the stockroom and found a young woman in her 20s standing at the restaurant door, holding a few-month-old baby in her arms. There was something familiar about her, but Sarah couldn't quite place it. "Excuse me," the young woman said shyly. "Are you Sarah from the documentary?" "I am. How can I help?" "I'm Fernanda, from New York City. I wrote a letter to you a few months ago." Sarah felt her heart race. "Fernanda, the letter about finding strength." "That's the one." Fernanda smiled, adjusting the baby in her arms. "I came to New York City for work and made a point to stop by here. I wanted you to meet Pedro." Sarah looked at the baby, a chubby, smiling boy who was curiously looking around, and felt an overwhelming emotion. "He's beautiful, Fernanda. And you? How are things?" "Much better. I finished my nursing degree, got a good job, and—" Fernanda blushed slightly. "I met someone. A wonderful guy who loves Pedro as if he were his own son." Sarah felt her eyes welling up. "Fernanda, what a beautiful story. I wanted to thank you in person. When I saw you talking about not giving up, about how love comes when we least expect it." Fernanda took a deep breath. "You saved my life. Literally." Dr. James appeared at that moment, coming to fetch Sarah for a family lunch. When she explained who Fernanda was, he also looked visibly moved. "Fernanda, you have no idea how important it is for us to know that our story helped someone," he said. "That was our greatest hope when we decided to make the documentary." They talked for over an hour. Fernanda shared about the difficult months of her pregnancy, how she had almost given up several times, about the day she watched the documentary and decided she would fight for her child and for herself. "And you know what's even funnier?" she said as she was saying goodbye. "I met my boyfriend at a diner where I was having lunch alone with Pedro. He offered to hold the baby while I ate, and we started talking. It was natural, simple, just like you said it was." As Fernanda walked away, Sarah stood at the restaurant door watching her disappear down the busy street. A young mother who had found the strength to rebuild her life, inspired by a story she had lived herself. "Dr. James," she said, still looking at the street. "Yes?" "I think I now understand what the true purpose of our story was." "What?" Sarah turned to him, tears in her eyes but smiling. "It wasn't just about us finding each other. It was about showing other people that it's possible to start over. That true love exists. That family is built with dedication, not just blood." Dr. James hugged her right there at the door of the restaurant, where it all began with a meal delivery and transformed into something much bigger than themselves. "Sarah," he whispered in her ear, "do you think our story has already reached its... Is this the end?" Sarah stepped back to look at him, then glanced inside the restaurant where Emily was playing with Maria while Margaret supervised, and then out to the street where Fernanda had disappeared, taking with her a piece of the hope they had shared. "No," she replied with absolute certainty. "I think our story is just beginning. The part we've lived was only the prologue. Now begins the part where we help others write their own impossible stories." Dr. James smiled, that smile she had learned to love since the first handwritten note. "So, shall we write the next chapter?" "Let's," Sarah replied, taking her husband's hand. "Let's write thousands of next chapters." And as they returned inside Margaret's seasoning, where their daughters played under the loving gaze of their grandmother, where familiar aromas mingled with laughter and conversation, where each dish served carried a bit of the most improbable love story New York City had ever seen, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that sometimes the best stories are the ones that never really end. They simply multiply, spread out, inspire other equally impossible and equally true stories. And if anyone asked what the secret ingredient was that transformed a simple meal delivery into a family saga that touched hearts across the country, Sarah would answer without hesitation: hope seasoned with courage, served with a lot of love. The rest, as always, fate would take care of providing.